Czechoslovakia. And as a child, I was a heavy reader of adventure novels. I loved the idea of discovering and exploring unknown lands. When while at university, I attended my first course on Canadian literature, I understood that this field was my chance at becoming a pioneer, at least in the Slovak context. Canadian literature wasn't an established academic discipline at Slovak universities at the time, and publishers were too busy publishing the British and American literature that couldn't be published under the totalitarian rule to take notice of their minor sister. When I started reading for a PhD in Canadian literature, the first Slovak PhD in this field, I had no idea how lonesome and frustrating my journey was going to be. There were no qualified mentors or supervisors, very few resources, very little support, and even less understanding. Having chosen a Canadian project, I had to cope with the position of an external doctoral student, which basically meant that I had to earn my living outside the university and study and write in the evenings and over the weekends, while my colleagues in British and American literature benefited from generous doctoral scholarships. In addition, I wasn't eligible for any support by the Canadian government until 2010, when I became a full-time assistant professor at the Department of English at Comenius University. And I was lucky to have been awarded the FEP grant in 2011, which means the year before the Understanding Canada program was terminated. However, since the time when I started doing my PhD, things have changed. There are, also thanks to the generous support of the Canadian Government for International Canadian Studies in the past, more and more instructors dealing with Canada at Slovak universities, and as a result, increasingly more students taking on Canada-related topics. Although Canadian literature still is not a core subject and is offered as an extra, the situation is incomparable to what it was, let's say, 10 years ago. While back then, a project with focus on Canada would have been unthinkable at national level, now, thanks to the growing support and interest among the academics, it has become a possibility. Also, the paper that I wrote for this conference, Canada Through the Lens of the Communist Censor, Translation of Canadian Literature under an Authoritarian Regime, is a follow-up of an Understanding Canada project that the Central European Association for Canadian Studies embarked on in 2010, with the aim of tracking down all translations made into the 8 languages spoken in the member countries of the association. At the same time, it's part of a larger individual project of mine that aims to reconstruct the image that Canada had in socialist Czechoslovakia based on articles in the press, books about Canada written by Czechs and Slovaks, and Canadian books that were translated during this uneasy period. Since Canada was too closely allied to the Soviet Union's chief political and ideological enemy, the United States, it was seen as part of the corrupt Western Bloc and its literature as a product of late bourgeois system. The books that got past the communist censor were therefore either left-leaning or they were interpreted in this way by paratexts accompanying their publication, portraying Canada as a country or as a capitalist country rife with social and economic inequalities. Or they were set in Canada's outdoors and drew an ideologically neutral but one-dimensional and slightly romanticized picture of Canada as a northern wilderness or a rural idyll. The second group, represented by authors like Ernest Thompson Seton and Montgomery, was particularly influential. Although they were not given much critical attention, being disregarded by literary scholars and critics as children's literature, they had the most decisive influence on how Canada was perceived in socialist Czechoslovakia anti-authoritarian regime, namely as a country of boundless spaces that promised what Slovaks missed at the time, and that was freedom. The popularity of these authors, and E.T. Seaton in particular, probably partly also explains why there is a lot of sympathy for Canada among the Czech and Slovak public, and why there is maybe so little knowledge of Canada. In Slovakia and in the Czech lands, that also those paralink addresses in his paper. Thank you very much.